The auction was over by 10 in the morning. 160 acres of Greer County hardpan, sitting under a sky the color of old bone, sold to Raymond Dole of Elk City for $38,000. That was everything. Not most of it. Everything. The savings account Loretta had built over 15 years, dollar by careful dollar, money set aside for emergencies neither of them wanted to name. The other bidders had dropped out before the auctioneer hit $30,000. One of them shook Raymond's hand afterward. Not the way you congratulate a man, but the way you look at someone you're not sure is going to be all right. The land was called the Briggs Place. 3 years of drought and a weed operation that never recovered. The county extension office had documented what was left: topsoil depleted, water table uncertain, caliche hardpan running in layers that would fight any plow. The previous owner had walked away owing more than the land was worth. The neighbors said the land was dead. Not resting. Dead. Raymond's wife, Loretta, had not come to the auction. She had asked him one last time the night before. He had held her hand at the kitchen table and told her he felt certain. She had gone to bed early. He had sat up alone until 2 in the morning, praying, until the certainty settled into something he couldn't have explained to anyone but God. There was something folded inside the deed packet Raymond signed that morning. A single page tucked between the county documents. He set it aside without reading it. He put the packet in a kitchen drawer when he got home, and he would not read that page for 6 months. By the time he did, the water was already in. I'll tell you what it said before this is over. Has God ever asked you to hold on to something, a decision, a piece of ground, a calling, when everything around you is telling you to let go? I want to hear that story in the comments. If Raymond Dole was wrong about that land, his family had nothing left to fall back on. Nothing. Raymond Dole had farmed his own 240 acres outside Elk City since 1991, grain sorghum and winter wheat, rotating by feel and weather, the way his father had taught him and his father's father before that. He knew Beckham County soil the way a man knows a person he has lived beside for 30 years. Its moods, its silences, what it needed before it asked. Loretta had been beside him for all of it. They had met at a church potluck in 1986, married the following spring, and raised 2 children on that farm. Travis, now 28 and working in Amarillo, and a daughter, Shelley, who had moved to Tulsa 3 years prior. Neither one of them had wanted to stay. Raymond had never said so to either of them, but Loretta knew it had cost him something he didn't have a name for. The Dole farm carried a $94,000 operating note with First Western AG out of Weatherford. Not unusual, not comfortable. Raymond had serviced it faithfully for 11 years, but 2 dry summers back-to-back had put him behind on the interest. He was not in foreclosure. He was in the early, quieter kind of danger, where the bank is still polite and the letters are still suggestions and a man can still pretend he has options. That was the summer he drove past the Briggs Place for the 3rd time and felt something he could not account for. He told Loretta it felt like recognition. She had looked at him across the supper table and said, quietly, "Raymond, that land is not alive." He hadn't argued. He had just nodded and gone out to the porch. He started reading about that stretch of Greer County ground on his own. Old survey maps, extension records, a USGS groundwater report from 2009 that most people had never seen and fewer had understood. He read it twice. Something in the numbers didn't match what people were saying about that land. Is there something you wish you had said to your father or your grandfather about the land, the debt, the sacrifice? Some of you carry that. I see you. Raymond Dole was not a man given to explaining himself. He just started saving. The news moved through Elk City the way news moves in a small place. Not announced, just present. By the 2nd week of September, people knew Raymond Dole had spent his savings on the Briggs hardpan. The feed store knew. The co-op knew. The men who sat at the counter of the Sonic on Highway 34 on Tuesday mornings knew. Most of them were not cruel about it. They were just certain. That land had broken Earl Briggs, and Earl Briggs had been a better farmer than Raymond, or so the story went. The county extension agent, a careful man named Delbert Hogue, ran into Raymond at the hardware store in mid-September and told him plainly that he had reviewed the Briggs acreage 2 years prior and found nothing to recommend it. Raymond thanked him and bought his fencing supplies and drove home without a word. Travis drove down from Amarillo the third weekend of September. He had not been asked. He sat across from his father at the kitchen table with his arms crossed and his jaw tight and said what he had been holding for 2 weeks, that Raymond had taken money that was supposed to be a safety net and sunk it into ground that 3 consecutive county surveys had written off. That Loretta had not slept properly since the auction. That if the operating note at First Western went sideways, there was now no cushion, no fallback, nothing between the family and foreclosure on the farm they already had. Raymond listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. When Travis finished, he said, "I heard you, son." Then he asked Travis if he wanted to stay for supper. Travis said no and drove back to Amarillo that evening. Loretta watched Raymond from the kitchen doorway after the truck left. She did not say anything. He went out to the porch and sat until dark. Did you ever watch a parent work a piece of land so hard it scared you? Not just tired, but the kind of tired that doesn't come back? Leave a comment. I think about that with stories like this one. First Western AG sent a courtesy review letter on October 3rd. The word courtesy was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Raymond brought a water well drilling contractor out to the Briggs place in the first week of November. A man named Kurt Sewell out of Hobart, who had drilled across Greer and Kiowa counties for 22 years. Kurt walked the property with Raymond for 2 hours, running his portable resistivity meter across the ground in a grid pattern, and then stood at the edge of the northwest quadrant for a long time without speaking. He told Raymond the readings were inconclusive, that the caliche layers would fight the drill hard in the first 150 feet, that if water was present at all, it was likely below 200 feet, and at that depth the cost per foot would climb. He quoted Raymond a number for a 300-foot test well that made Loretta sit down when she heard it that evening. They drilled for 3 days. The first attempt, in the south center of the property, hit hardpan and fractured shale and nothing else at 190 feet. Kurt pulled the rig back and looked at Raymond without speaking. Raymond told him to try the northwest corner. Loretta called Raymond on the second evening of the northwest attempt. She was not angry. That was the thing that hit hardest. She was just quiet and careful, and she said, "Raymond, I need you to tell me honestly if you still believe this." He stood at the edge of that cracked ground with the phone against his ear, and the drill rig lit up behind him in the cold November dark, and he said, "Yes." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Okay," and they both stayed on the line without talking for almost a minute before she said goodnight. That night, Raymond sat in the truck alone and prayed for a long time. Not asking, not bargaining, just staying. The folded page was still in the kitchen drawer at home, unread. We'll come back to it. But first, you need to understand what the next morning looked like. The drill hit something at 281 feet. Kurt Sewell called it cautiously at first. A sand aquifer, not the Ogallala, which ran deep and far to the north, but a localized perch formation that the surface surveys hadn't picked up cleanly. He ran a pump test for 4 hours. The yield was modest. Not a gusher, not a miracle in the dramatic sense. 18 gallons per minute sustained, which in Greer County hardpan was not modest at all. It was enough. Raymond stood at the northwest corner of that property in the cold November light and did not say anything for a long time. Kurt Sewell, who was not a sentimental man, packed up his equipment and left Raymond alone out there. Raymond walked the perimeter of the 160 acres one time, slowly, in the cold, before he drove home. He did not call Travis. Not that day. What Raymond did over the following 6 months was quiet work. He brought in a soil amendment contractor from Woodward and spent carefully on a gypsum application across the worst of the caliche layers. He installed a basic drip irrigation line from the new well to a 40-acre test plot on the northwest quadrant, the best ground closest to the water. In March, he put in grain sorghum. The neighbors watched. Nobody said much. The first sorghum came up in May. Thin at first, tentative, the kind of green that makes a farmer hold his breath. By the third week of May, it was holding. By June, it was past holding. It was growing. Raymond stood at the edge of that northwest field on a Tuesday morning in June. The sky a pale, washed-out blue, the sorghum moving slow in a light south wind. And he called Travis. The conversation was short. Travis asked how much it had yielded. Raymond told him. There was a long silence. Then Travis said, "Dad, just that." Loretta came out to the field that afternoon. She stood beside Raymond without speaking, and he put his arm around her, and they both looked at the green. The first sorghum harvest off the Northwest 40 came in at 62 bushels per acre. Not record-breaking. Not the kind of number that makes the county paper, but off ground that every qualified person in Greer County had written off as dead. It was the kind of number that made men go quiet. Raymond sold the harvest, serviced the interest on the first Western note, and started planning the spring expansion. 40 acres would become 90. The mockery had not entirely stopped, but it had changed character, from certainty to something quieter, more like the sound of people revising a story they had told too confidently. In January, cleaning out the kitchen drawer, Loretta found the deed packet. She pulled it out to file it properly, and the folded page fell onto the table. She called Raymond in from the porch. He sat down and unfolded it. It was handwritten, Earl Briggs's hand, careful and slanted, dated 3 weeks before the auction. One page. Earl had written that he believed water was present on the northwest corner at or around 280 feet, based on a resistivity reading he had paid for himself but couldn't afford to act on. He had run out of money before he could drill. He had prayed someone would come after him and finish what he couldn't start. He had left the note for whoever God sent next. Raymond read it twice. Then he set it flat on the table and sat with it for a long time. He had never read that page. He had drilled the northwest corner because after a night of prayer in a cold truck, that was where he felt led. Earl Briggs had prayed for someone to come. Raymond Dole had come, not knowing why, only that he was supposed to. God had prepared the answer before Raymond knew the question. I think about stories like this one because they remind me that sometimes the land holds more than soil. It holds someone else's prayer, left there waiting for the person God was already sending. If this story stirred something in you about faith, about obedience, about a sacrifice someone made that you only understood later, I'd like to hear it. The comments on this channel are real. People read them.